Welcome to today's virtual education event on performing capsule endoscopy procedures in the new normal, presented by Dr. Javier Parra and Dr. George Sanchez. I'm Elena Jaime, Product Manager at CapsoVision, and I will be your moderator for today's event. This presentation is being recorded in its entirety, and a replay will be available on the Endoscopy Now app within a few days. During the event, if you have any questions or comments, please submit them using the chat box at the bottom of your viewing screen. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We are honored today to present today's speakers and thank them for joining us. Dr. Javier Parra and Dr. George Sanchez are board-certified GI physicians at GastroHealth in Miami, Florida, which is one of the largest private GI groups in the country, specializing in the treatment of GI disorders, nutrition, and digestive health, with multiple locations in Florida, Alabama, Virginia, and Washington. Both doctors have extensive experience with capsule endoscopy, so they are poised to deliver an informative talk. Dr. Parra and Sanchez, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alina. So we'll focus our efforts today on discussing performing capsule endoscopy in this new normal. I don't think that anybody attending this talk with the technology we have today ever imagined the word pandemic coming out of their vocabulary so often, other than in casual reading. So we'll talk about reducing the exposure risk because there is no communal data recorder equipment used. There's a single ingestion visit and a remote video review with this technology. This is us, Drs. Papa and Sanchez, in recent and old mugs. We'll talk about indications and uses of the capsule endoscopy within the small bowel. With GastroHealth, the average capsule endoscopy procedure volume, our number of readers, and the previous experience that we have with capsule endoscopy with other systems, features that are specific to CapsoCam Plus, which appealed to our practice and made the ultimate switch, how we use it in our practice, and the impact on of the pandemic on the current and the future use of capsule endoscopy. And lastly, we'll do some case review. So this is intended for the visualization of the small bowel mucosa in adults, as the FDA has indicated for its use. It may be used as a tool for detection of abnormalities of the small bowel. And as we know, this technology was initially developed abroad, but this particular one, CapsoCam, is developed in the United States. It has the longest battery life and the widest field of view. Has 4 cameras as opposed to 1, and the length is a little more than the usual capsule, which reduces tumbling in the small bowel. There is an online EHR that is HIPAA compliant, and it has increased our efficiencies in reading studies and making ourselves available to book them more than one at a time in the office, which we'll go into later. So this is the usual capsule that is being used, the SB3 by Given, which provides this kind of view. And if you think about it, it's like if you're rolling paper and seeing through it, and the pathology is written on the paper, not on the lumen itself. And so you can certainly miss some of the pathology by not looking at the mucosa. And when you look at the technology that CapsoCam offers, it's like you're unfurling a scroll of the small bowel. It looks initially as though you're reading in an IMAX theater. That's how it looks like. Let's see, jump to the next slide here. Perfect. So the tunnel view that Given offers is different to the mucosal view that CapsoCam offers, and this is demonstrated by having observed the different elements of capsules as they review the ampulla of bladder. So they have a much higher chance of visualizing the ampulla, which is considerably always there, unless you have any alteration in your anatomy from surgery. You can consider the capsule will always be there, and so you had a higher chance of seeing it with CapsoCam than PillCam. And as such, you could extrapolate that you could visualize more pathology in the small bowel than with this technology than with the tunnel vision technology. As GastroHealth, we started using CapsoCam in March of 2019 with a pilot program that Dr. Sanchez and I conducted. And so far we have, I think it's more than that at this point, 176 capsules to date with 6 dedicated readers. We have a 48-hour turnaround time and integration to our electronic medical record system. Most of the common indications we use it for is obscure GI bleeding, iron deficiencies. And Dr. Sanchez, you want to take over with the workflow?
Yeah, so we'll go into with regards to what changes and adaptations we had to do within our practice. As with any new change and new technology, there are some challenges and some pitfalls, which I'll discuss. And then we'll address the ability to do remote reading capability with regards to other care centers or maybe even other physicians in different parts of the world. So we do have one, which I'll go into about reading from the Caribbean. As Javier mentioned from before, we had looked at how this would affect our ability to be able to detect small bowel lesions, bleeding lesions, or even make other diagnoses. So it made sense to give this a shot, but from the practice standpoint, financially, would we be able to do it? And how would the patient experience be like? So from looking at the advantages that it came to the practice, from the first capsule, we would make a profit mainly because there was zero capital investment or maintenance costs. All we had to do was start using the capsule. Initially with CapsoView, we would have the license to be able to use it in as many computers as we wanted. We weren't limited just to 1 or 2 computers or a handful of readers that would read it. And with regards to the CapsoCloud account, download center, and FedEx shipment, there were no costs involved with that. There's no charge for storage of all the CapsoCam Plus studies on the CapsoCloud as required by law. And there was less time in prepping patients by the administration, by the staff. So patients had to spend less time in the office. We didn't see any contraindications with pacemaker or AICD. So for us, once the medical side of things made sense, from the practice side, it was almost like, why not? Let's give this a shot. So the patients, when they prep for this, what we do in our practice is the day before, they're allowed a light lunch. And then after that, they start prep using Miralax, 119 grams with 32 ounces of Gatorade, starting at about 7 p.m. And that dinner will be a clear liquid diet. At approximately 9:30 p.m., we give them 8 ounces of water with Mylicon. And after that, the following day, 2 hours prior to their examination, they'll take 17 grams of Miralax. The patient then comes into the office. They ingest it in the office, witnessed by someone, and will drink 8 ounces of water with some Mylicon in it. And shortly after that, they'll be able to start clear liquids. And then 4 hours after, they'll be able to take Miralax, again, 17 grams to help everything flush out. So the ingestion time is really less than 5 minutes in the office. There wasn't a lot of prep time with regards to using recorders and belts and kind of teaching the patient of what should be on or off. Afterwards, they go home and we provide them with a kit, which is a retrieval kit. As you can see, there is a wand there that the patient will then flush out. They'll pour some warm water over it to clean any residue, and they'll capture the capsule and then put it in to a container, which is then shipped away. So the capsule is typically retrieved anywhere from 3 to 30 hours. And after they FedEx it, the turnaround time is less than 5 days. Typically, we're seeing about 3 to 4 days that we see the capsule end up getting uploaded to the CapsoCloud. Afterwards, the physician, in our own practice, we communicate with each other through our EMR, and we end up designated who's going to read that capsule, of which they could read it On average, early on, it takes probably 30 minutes, but as we get a little bit more comfortable with the technology, we could, shrink it down to 15, 20 minutes, depending on what you're finding on the capsule. So with regards more so with the workflow, again, there was no data recorder or docking station required. So if you click on it, Hub, it'll show some of the advantages of no belts or recorders needed. One of the advantages with regards to scheduling is that with the old system, we had to have the recorder available. So in our practice, we're 17 physicians and 4 APPs. So we have a large volume of patients, and if we're doing a lot of capsules, there's a chance that those 2 recorders could be taken out at the same time, and we couldn't necessarily schedule capsules during that time. Not to mention that the patient would have to come in the morning at a specific time to be able to ingest the capsule, and then they would have to come back in the evening before the office closed in order to return the belt, and then that would be downloaded, and eventually sometime in the future that would be read. So they don't really follow office hours, and weekends, again, we were closed, so the patients, we would be limited on being able to do that. We know with CapsoCam that the capsule needs to be retrieved, and therefore we see that it reaches the it reaches the toilet, I guess, and we've seen the whole small bowel and colon. So a lot of times before, we would end up having to get a KUB when we didn't have the capsule reach the colon, as there was concern for retention. If there are patients that there's an active bleed that you're concerned about, there's something called the Capso Access System, which we have within our office, and it's a rapid on-site download. So instead of the patient having to FedEx it because you're concerned that they're acutely bleeding and you want to find out where they're bleeding from, you could download it within your practice and have a result much sooner. So with regards to the pitfalls and challenges, as with any new technology, we're used to viewing things through one certain lens. So this is a telescope, and this is the way that we're all used to reading capsule and looking at the mucosa one certain way. And we're just so used to looking at things in a certain way that all of a sudden with new technology and things change, one of the biggest adaptations is, again, looking at a planetarium, the way that we're able to look at the stars and the planets. So it's a new technology, and we did have some difficulty with providers, again, being used to looking at it a different way, now adapting to looking at something through a different lens. Not that it makes it wrong, but you just have to get adjusted to it. IT support, we did need to have IT on board in order to get us connected with some of the software onto our computer. And we've all been on hold with IT for a very long time for something that seems so seamless and takes them 5 minutes, but yet we're waiting for hours and maybe even years. With the cloud-based system, although we didn't need to use the software on one specific computer, the question was it truly cloud-based? Because when we would download a capsule and we would have to read it, it would save onto that one specific computer. So if I had to leave in between offices, or I started reading a capsule and I had to go somewhere else, or I wanted to read it from home, if I started it somewhere, the initial work that was done was saved onto that computer, and then I would have to start again. So the question was, is this truly cloud-based? Yeah, it was with the storage, but not my reading. My reading was restricted to that one computer. So now we have mentioned with regards to remote reading capability. So in this slide, on the third bullet point, we'll talk about streaming. And I'd like to refer to streaming as a game changer, mainly because we'll be able to read from anywhere 24/7. It's HIPAA compliant, and it's all cloud-based. So now we're having the ability to be able to read for different care centers. And as I mentioned previously, with regards to the Caribbean, we do have a physician that wants to do capsules and provides a service to his patients, but is not able to, or is not interested in reading capsules. So we have a friendly relationship with him in the sense that he's able to provide the capsules to the patient in the moment, and then once it gets uploaded, we read it, we communicate with him directly over the phone, and then we end up faxing him the results. It's important to look at the packaging, which is to the right of the screen, because the packaging is, you're able to, once you remove it and disengage it from the magnet on the bottom, that's really what activates the capsule, and you'll see the lights start blinking. But the ability to be able to provide even patients within their own home, if they start acutely bleeding, the capsule, and you could tell them how to prep, and eventually they're able to take it at home, is another advantage. We know that when patients start bleeding, the likelihood of finding the source of the bleeding it relates to the proximity to when the bleed actually started happening. So streaming really was a game changer for us in the sense that it really opened up where you were able to read from, and everything is saved on the cloud. We'll go on to the next slide so you guys can see how it looks. So this is, you could read it from your laptop, desktop. We've even read it from an iPad. So basically you just have to go online. The patient list will be there for you, and the way that we do it, we assign it so that it has the doctor's name on it. We have one person in the office that's dedicated to taking care of everything that has to do with shipping and labeling. You do receive an email when the capsule is completed, and then our care coordinator sends us that information through our EMR. So as it showed there, you could play directly from online, and as you capture an image, you could really write directly from there. It's real time that you're able to do this. The landmark suggestions have been extremely accurate. So you could go through, if you're not happy with the image that they suggest, you could go back and forth, but I've been extremely impressed and surprised on how accurate the system has been to picking up exactly where the duodenum starts. So it does also have red detection. And I could say in the CapsoView, which was the prior version, it was very, very specific at finding it. So we're working out some bugs with regards to the red light indicator. And then from there, your report is basically complete. You pick your pictures, you write what you want, and then you're able to sign it, and it uploads to the cloud. And the way that we do it is we have a PDF version that she's able to, she being our care coordinator, is able to download directly into our EMR. And then we provide the physician, that is the referring physician, if it's not our own patient, a little summary of exactly what we're finding on the capsule.
So as we reviewed, there are no equipment costs. Even in the case of Capsule Access, we were provided with the particular unit to download the capsules because of the volume that we have provided and the size of our practice. There are no software costs associated, or licensing fees, or equipment maintenance fees. We've had a great relationship with the person that supports us and our account. No belt, no equipment upgrade, no battery replacement costs, no equipment loss or damage, unless the patient loses it in the toilet, which we haven't had any happen in over 176 procedures, and there are no contracts necessary. You can call this environmentally friendly because the capsules don't get flushed into the sewers and waterways. We know it's been excreted, as George was saying, because it needs to come out of the patient in order for you to get the video. So you don't need to have a KUB if the patient hasn't seen the capsule. There is a local customer service and technical support. As I said, our experience has been phenomenal with this. CapsoCam provides pair analysis, billing strategies, and they pre-certify claim denials. They pre-certify coverages and helps us with claim denials. And of course, before committing, if you want to do a pilot program, that's more than recommended. And one thing that I don't know if George mentioned, they also provide with access to expert readers around the country. So if you are not comfortable with the procedure that you're performing, the things that you're reading and the findings that you're documenting, you can always run the case by an expert reader that's available to you. Because of the length of the capsule, it has reduced tumbling, it has higher detection rate. All those studies were published with the first version of the capsule. We are on the third version of CapsoCam that has enhanced features as far as image processing go. So far for us 100% capsule retrieval, but the quoted figure in the literature is 97%. That's pretty much what I had said before. George?
So as we look at the impact of the pandemic and future use, we're looking at stuff that reduces exposure, risk, and costs. So when the patients come in, as I mentioned, there is only one interaction that needs to happen. So there's limited interaction with the facility and the staff by not having to have multiple times throughout the day that patients are having to come in or come in contact with multiple staff members to educate, administer, and leave. Right now, we have one person that is dedicated to administering the capsule and providing the instructions, and the patient's able to leave after that. So you eliminate having to clean, maintain, and really reuse recorders, belts, pouches, straps, really anything else at this point that multiple people would come in contact with. So there's a non-communal capsule. That capsule that patient takes, for all intent and purpose, is theirs. And once they retrieve it and send it back, there's no one else that's really handling that aside from the company once they're downloading it. The streamlined scheduling, again, there's only one patient visit that comes in. We're not having to have scheduling conflicts due to recorder availability or the time of day or weekend times. And with regards to the software upgrades, there's no IT that needs to be on site or extra personnel. This is all done remotely through the CapsoCloud. So there's no extra staff that needs to be in your office necessarily doing things to your computer to make it work the way that it needs to. So the impact of the pandemic and future use. So we're not going to be limited just to one single site. The question would be, are we going to just be mailing the capsule to the patient, as I mentioned, that we are able to do? And are we going to be transitioning to tele-ingestion, where we're going to be on the phone and video conference with the patient, observing when they take it to make sure that there's no issue with them taking the capsule and giving them instructions? Or are we going to be, we've seen a lot of drive-through parties or drive-through retirement. Are we going to have a drive-through ingestion, which the patient will stay in their car? We would go down, administer it to them, and then they continue going on, and they don't have to come into the facility. They'll only come in contact with one person. I'm not sure what the future will hold, but the fact that the ability to be able to do this is there is an added advantage in the current state that we're living in.
With that, we're going to review some cases. This is the case of a 65-year-old woman who has a history of lung cancer that is metastatic to the liver, who presented with several episodes of gastrointestinal bleeding of large volume, received transfusions and an upper endoscopy and colonoscopy by another physician, who then referred her to me for capsule endoscopy. And you can see this finding. Let me replay that again. It's subtle, but there were many of these areas in the capsule. And further down, there was active bleeding, as you can observe in the second video. So I took her to the GI lab for a single balloon enteroscopy, which demonstrated a distal duodenal mass and a large mid-jejunal mass with active bleeding that ended up being metastatic lung cancer. She declined an operation, even though these were the only two identifiable areas a year ago, and she was seen last week in a telemedicine visit with several other areas still on palliative chemotherapy. This is a second case without any particular history of cancer, other than remote prostate cancer that was treated with prostatectomy. Normal PSA, and this gentleman came in with several episodes of gastrointestinal bleeding, requiring transfusions with hemodynamic instability. And this is the finding in the mucosa that you can see quite clearly, kind of villus transformation there. So we went in endoscopically and found there to be a bleeding tumor. There was an adenocarcinoma. He's still going through treatment with chemotherapy. This third case is a gentleman from Haiti who had acute abdominal pain that was worked up in Haiti as an intussusception. It resolved on its own. He was seen by a surgeon at Miami Cancer Institute. There wasn't anything to be found in scans. So I was referred the patient, and the decision was to perform an enteroscopy first. And so I tattooed from the top and the bottom without finding any particular lesion. And then the patient was sent home without us being able to give a capsule because it had been given, the particular capsule that the hospital uses was given to another patient that day. So patient had to go to Haiti. Was out of our control, but eventually he came back with a second intussusception and was sent to our office where we did this capsule that shows this ulcerated lesion. And you can see a flash of the tattoo in a later picture of the capsule. So this is the first tattoo, the ulcer, and then in another picture of the capsule, you see the second tattoo. He was taken to surgery, and it was just an ulcerated lesion. He took a number of prescriptions of NSAIDs for an old football injury, resolved uneventfully after surgery.
So this fourth case, I really enjoy because we're really starting to see things in a different way. This is a 56-year-old man that has had this fleeting diagnosis of Crohn's disease for multiple years, and we could really never pin down the diagnosis. We thought at one point he ended up having enteroscopy and there was some small bowel ulcers, but they were real minimal, and maybe this was NSAID related or not. And eventually he came back with iron deficiency anemia and ended up having a second capsule done. So the first image on the top, you can see how ulcers can kind of look like, and then you'll see this flash of white, which almost looks like, just if someone took a picture with a flashlight, right there you go, right in front of you. And that's how we're seeing now a fibrous stricture. So this gentleman has stricture in Crohn's disease. So this is another part of the video of the capsule, which you're going to see on the lower right-hand side. Again, ulceration, a flash of white, and almost like this small opening, which is really the stricture on the right-hand side. So we're starting to view things through a different way that I'm not sure that I had seen before. And Javier brought up a very good point that in reading these capsules, I'm fortunate enough that I'm partners with Javier and several other physicians that read. So frequently we do bounce things off each other. But if we needed an expert reader, the company does provide that. I think that's a good idea, especially that we're viewing things through a different light. So this patient, again, we're having these findings. They were lower down in the ileum, and he ended up going an enteroscopy anal approach. Can you go back to the next one? The back one? Yeah, there you go. So I like this. Go back to the pictures. Yeah, so there you go. So the top picture on the top is an ulcer. The middle picture and the picture on the upper right were the ones that Javier was pointing out with regards to stricturing disease. And you really see this fibrous scar that I'm not sure that I had seen previously. And this is a nice picture on the bottom we had mentioned about capsule retention and whatnot. You get somewhat surprised when you see the enteroscopy pictures of how this capsule was actually able to pass. So on the left side of the picture, you'll see the lumen, which is strictured down and narrowed, and to the right side is normal appearing lumen. And then we could show the enteroscopy pictures. So again, these are the enteroscopy findings with multiple strictures, ulceration, and erythema throughout the ileum. There's one more picture. There you go. So again, you can see how on the capsule you can relate that fibrous band that you're seeing now, how it looked like on an enteroscopy, which again we're seeing for the first time. So he's been on treatment. He's doing well. He's on an anti-TNF, and it was a very cool case to be able to compare it to what he's had done in the years past. So I think now we've learned, we've gone through some of the advantages that it could bring to your practice. I think that we're able to see things through a different lens. I think you can see these pictures now, which Javier and I have enjoyed kind of going back and forth with. We're getting new pictures of patients taking pictures of the camera. So we're having people come out with their iPhones, and that speaks to the battery life of the capsule, that they're taking pictures of the picture. So this is on the top, someone with their phone, and this one's on the bottom. That's the wand that they use to collect the capsule with. So I think we've had some success with this. We've been very happy with it. Streaming, as I mentioned before, has been a game changer for us, and I think that you would consider it, and you might notice a significant change in your workflow and in your practice. And whatever the new normal is, I believe that this system is advantageous, and it'd be worth giving a shot. Jav, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Just want to thank everybody for giving us a chance to talk to you about this technology, and with that, we'll entertain questions.
Thank you, Drs. Parra and Sanchez, for this excellent presentation on capsule endoscopy. We will now move into the Q&A portion of the broadcast. If you haven't already done so, please submit your questions and comments using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And I do think we have a couple of questions already. So one of the questions is, CapsoCam is slightly bigger than PillCam SB3. What is your retention rate so far?
0. It has been 0. We have not had, thankfully, any retentions. I think we do screen our patients as far as small bowel surgery or small bowel obstructions go, especially if the patient has a known history of Crohn's disease, and we haven't had any happen. Accepted literature is between 3 to 5%, but we haven't had one happen. So that's I guess the whole answer.
Javier, to that point, I also want to add, and those patients that either are already coming in that are prepped for a colonoscopy and you need to do a capsule on them, or patients that have difficulty swallowing the capsule, or you gave them a capsule and it stayed in the stomach for a long time because they have gastroparesis and delayed emptying. So I was worried at first, and being able to deliver this endoscopically, because again, the length is a little different, the size a little larger, but we haven't had any difficulty whatsoever in being able to administer this directly into the small intestine endoscopically. Would you agree?
Yeah, correct. I second that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, was it difficult to transition? How long did it take for you to get used to the panoramic view?
So when we first started doing the pilot, it was to me it was more wonders than anything else to see the small bowel in that light. I think that initially we had some of the readers kind of not get used to that, but we had a seminar that we did for our readers, in a restaurant, a couple hours and a bottle of wine, and it kind of came down to a new way of viewing things, and we all support each other in our practice, and we ended up having the 6 dedicated readers that we have now, which were the core group of readers with the previous capsule. What made it even easier was that ultimately CapsoCloud came in And it's just a game changer to be able to sit wherever you are and be able to say, okay, this study and these findings are going to be recorded, and tomorrow I can open them from my office, or I can have another expert reader open it from another state or a country for that matter. It's just a game changer. I think it's the wave of the future, and the way that we see changes in the mucosa with this capsule is it's a game changer altogether.
Thank you. Another question is about reading time. So you mentioned that your reading time is 15 to 20 minutes once accustomed to the new view. Streaming on the cloud is very new. So the question is the 15 to 20 minutes with streaming or the desktop software application? And if it's not with streaming, then what is your reading time with streaming?
So I think that at least for me, the time that it takes me to read for both is essentially the same. I thought I was concerned initially with streaming that the video was going to be delayed and it wasn't going to be playing as quickly as it does on the desktop using CapsoView. So the thing that has surprised me is how quickly, and there's no delay whatsoever. You don't see a lag in the video. The images are so crisp that you're able to sort through it very quickly. Again, the landmarks are also, they're so specific that you're able to, so I read a capsule the other day that the capsule was tumbling in and out of the stomach into the duodenum, and the software was able to capture exactly when it finally stayed in the duodenum and continued. So the landmarks is very specific. The red light indicator, as I mentioned, is good, and it's going to be able to find things fairly quickly. But aside from, again, if these are patients that have undergone an upper endoscopy and colonoscopy, I look at still the stomach and colon when I'm reading, but I know that this has been investigated, so I view that at a different speed as I do necessarily the small bowel. So once I read the small bowel, that's really what you're dedicated and looking at. Again, we have found pathology in the stomach and in the colon, so I would recommend looking at it, but I look at it at a different speed. So all in all, from beginning to end, without any interruptions, it takes me about 15 to 20 minutes. Granted, if it stays in the small bowel for a particularly long time, it might take a little longer. If there's a lot of pathology that you're going to annotate and have to do part of your report, that might take a little bit longer. But for the most part, I would say that early on it took me probably a good 30 minutes to get used to things and looking at it at a slower view, but it's been pretty consistent ever since.
Okay, and we have another question, which is about bowel prep. So the question is, do you adjust based on patient history, symptoms, etc.? For example, more aggressive for patients with abdominal pain, bloating, and constipation?
No, I think we follow the same protocol for everybody. We have the way we run things in our office is we have folders that are reviewed by doctors in different committees. And we do insist in our care coordinators kind of don't veer from the protocol. So we don't consider that any difference between patients.
Okay, and another question here is, have you had a higher yield, meaningful yield? And what speed do you typically read at? Those are two different questions, but maybe you can answer both.
So I guess it's hard to tell the yield unless you're doing a tandem study and you're giving one capsule and seeing what that capsule shows, and then doing another capsule or doing CapsoCam and seeing what this finds as compared to the first one. So I don't know how to say the yield, but am I finding pathology? Yes. Am I probably missing pathology too? I'm sure that we always miss things. But I don't feel that compared to the capsule reading that I was doing previously, that I'm particularly missing out on something or I'm not finding things. On the contrary, I think that we're just kind of viewing things through a different way, and we're seeing things that we may not have seen before, which is, again, interesting, and we'll have to figure out as time goes on some of the things that we see, what do they necessarily mean? And luckily with the cases that we provided, we have good endoscopic evaluation and pathology to be able to coordinate the two, which sometimes we're not able to really associate with. So I think that question is difficult until that study comes out. And then what was the second question?
The second question was, what speed do you typically read at?
Right. So when I look at the small bowel, I read it at 2. When I'm going through the stomach or the colon, I'll look at it at about 2.5 or 3. It took me a while it took me probably, I don't know, what would you say, like maybe 5-10 capsules, to get your number?
Around that. I think so, yeah.
So I think for now, I'm at 2 and I'm happy with it. Again, some of the stuff you may need to go a little bit slower. Some stuff you could go a little bit faster. But you're able to get through a study once you get used to everything. Some of the stuff you just need to get familiarized with, and it just becomes routine. And then you're able to sort through things a lot quicker.
Like everything, it doesn't, you cannot get through an Albert Camus novel in a day before you get through the ABCs. But if you learn to read these capsules with patients and a trainer alongside with you, you'll be able to go at a speed of 2 to 3 in the small bowel. I very seldomly read one study at 4 or 5, but I do give it a quick view before, like if I'm between patients, I give it a quick review before I sit down to read it at 2 or 3. But it just takes experience, and whatever you're comfortable with, you should read at. Now, the other thing is, if you feel that you missed something and the patient clinically is telling you that they're still bleeding, they're not, the issue is not resolved with a negative capsule, you can always repeat studies. You can always, go back and revisit the study that you have in the cloud, or do another study if you definitely had a negative, capsule that you had reviewed before.
Great, thank you. And I think maybe we have time for another question here, which is, what has the patient compliance been like so far? Anyone flushed the capsule down the toilet? I believe you might have touched upon that before, but also a follow-up question to that is, do patients look at you like you're crazy when you tell them they have to retrieve capsule themselves?
Yeah, so I thought initially that was going to be a problem because patients hadn't been used to doing that. And, we give them this kit with this hat and this wand, and they go home with all this stuff. And we're saying, look, you're going to have to, poop this out, and then you're going to have to grab it and put it in this container. And I thought there was going to be a lot of pushback from patients not wanting to do this. Or saying, listen, doc, you're crazy. There's no way I'm doing this study. But on the contrary, I think, we're confident on the process. We tell them this is exactly how it goes and the reasoning behind it. And we educate the patient and we make them feel comfortable with it. And we haven't had any pushback whatsoever. Sometimes we'll get, a kind of a smirk here and there. But to date, that I know of, we have not had a patient refuse to do it because they refuse to grab the capsule using the wands, or doing the whole process of having to mail it out. On the contrary, they like the fact that they're in the privacy of their own home. They don't have to necessarily come back and give us back something. So I agree. Early on, I was skeptical of, man, are patients going to really want to do this? But we haven't had any pushback whatsoever. And we've had a good experience. We haven't had anyone flush it down the toilet, or we haven't lost a capsule or anything along those lines.
Anything I've gotten the comment, oh, that's so cool. Are you serious? I'm going to see the thing blinking. And they just, I haven't had one patient refuse yet.
Yeah, clearly the patients aren't too grossed out by it if they're taking pictures of it and, using their phone to see, wow, this thing came right, to post it. They're going on social media.
Okay, thank you. I think this concludes today's presentation and Q&A. Thank you very much, Dr. Parra and Dr. Sanchez. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. The replay will be available within a few days in case you would like to revisit the information we discussed here. Thanks again and enjoy your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.